Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in. I go by the name of Pasta Nick, and today I'm going to be designing a little Nintendo controller. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start this by drawing the outer shape of the controller, and I want to get a couple circles in here just to form the outer parts of it. So I'm going to get the ellipse tool and draw a few circles here. And I'm going to duplicate this one and drag it to the other side. And I'm going to hold Option and click on the circle while also holding Shift and just drag it over here. So now I want to add this top line and bottom line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this shape. I'm going to double click it, and I'm going to press C on the keyboard, and I'm going to open this path right here. And I also want to open it down here so that I can add this bottom line. So I'm going to go ahead and draw or put a guide down here where I want the intersection to be. And I'm going to go back in here, grab my scissor tool, and click right when it says intersect. So now I can go ahead and remove this piece. And I'm going to do the same exact thing for this circle. So that's just a double click to isolate the shape, C on the keyboard for the scissor tool, and I'm going to press on this anchor and where this intersects. And so now I can get rid of this piece, and I can join these shapes together. So I'm going to grab the pen tool and click on the anchor, and I'm going to also hold Shift while doing this just in case. And I'm going to close the path right here. Now I'm going to do the same exact thing for the bottom part. First I'm going to get rid of this guide and go back to my pen tool, click on the anchor, and click on the other anchor. So now we have our controller shape. I want to add these circles in here, and what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to insert another couple of guides right where that intersects, and right there. So up in this corner, that's where I'm gonna start my shape. That's where I'm gonna start the circle shape. So I'm gonna hold Shift and drag another circle with the ellipse tool until it's something like that. And I'm gonna then select it and come up here to Object, Transform, and I'm gonna scale it down a little bit. So about there's decent. So I'm gonna hit OK, and I'm gonna do the same thing on this other side. But I'm gonna make this circle a little bit smaller. So holding Shift and drawing my circle. It doesn't really have to be too perfect, but that works. And then I'm going to scale it down again by come up here to the Object, Transform, and Scale. So we'll come down to about 60%. Alright. So now I'm going to draw a few more of these shapes in here, and I want to do these buttons. So I'm going to draw another circle on top to about right there. Actually, I'm going to do this a different way. I'm going to draw a rectangle just kind of estimate the size, and I'm going to round the corners. You can do this by selecting the shape, pressing A, and then pulling in on these corners. And now I want to draw some circles in the middle here, so I'm going to do this by, it's going to seem a little weird, but I'm going to draw a square inside of here. And I'm going to scale it down a little bit. Well, actually, I'm going to align it to the left edge. And I'm going to round these corners out all the way as well. So now I'm going to scale it down by coming up here to Object, Transform, and Scale. So we'll come down to about 60%. That seems all right. And I'm going to come to this side and I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to draw a square. I'm going to round the corners. And I'm going to scale it down. Alright, so it seems like there might be a little too much space in between. So I want to tighten that up a little bit. And I'm going to do that by getting the direct selection tool. And I'm going to draw a selection around this right side. Actually, I'm going to enter outline mode, Command Y. And I'm going to do the selection here. And it looks like it's selecting this outer circle. So I'm going to deselect these points because I don't want to touch that. So now I have the right side selected. I'm going to use the arrow key and just nudge it in a little bit. Something like that. And I think I also want to take the stroke down a little bit over here. So I'm going to grab these buttons again, and I'm going to come over here to the stroke panel and drop it down to 4 pixels. I might come back and change that. I'm not sure if I totally like that yet. Okay, so now I'm going to duplicate, holding Option on the keyboard and dragging down. So now that I have both sets of buttons, I want to rotate them equally. So I'm going to actually select both, and I'm going to group them. You can press Command G on the keyboard or up here to Object and Group. And I'm going to hover over this upper right corner until the Rotate tool shows up. And I'm going to hold Shift and pull it up to give it a nice 45-degree rotation. So it should look okay. I'm gonna do a little bit of tweaking to this. It's not quite working as I wanted it to, but I'm gonna try some things here. I'm gonna drag out these corners a little bit. Kind of center it around a little bit. And you'll notice that the circles become a little weird when I did that. Let's see if I can fix it. No. I'm going to undo all that. I'm going to come back to that later. Alright. So I'm going to come and draw the directional pad. So with the rectangle tool, I'm just going to draw a couple rectangles. going to duplicate this one by pressing Command C and Command F to paste in place. And I'm going to rotate the one on top. So I'm just going to select that, hover over the corner, and drag it. So what I want to do now is combine this. So I'm going to select both rectangles and come over here to my Pathfinder and hit this combine option. Cool. So I want to center it within the circle now, so hopefully I can just get the smart guides to do some work for me. Oh. There we go. That doesn't look centered. So you can always make sure you're centering everything by drawing guides. I love the draw guides. Can't be sure enough. So it looks like I'm off by quite a bit. There we go. So I want to round the corners a tiny bit here. So I'm going to select the outer corners of this direction pad, and I'm going to come up here to the corner radius panel and give it a value of maybe like 5. Looks alright. Okay, so I'm debating on increasing the size here. Let's just go with it. So I'm just increasing the stroke right now. And that actually looks pretty good. Okay, so I want to now draw these little arrows on the directional pad. So I'm going to do that by drawing a square with the shape tool. You can hit M on the keyboard as well. So I'm going to draw a nice square and change the stroke to a fill and try and center it up as best as I can. So I'm going to duplicate this and drag it down. Actually, you know what? I need to get rid of one of the points here. So I'm going to press the subtract key on the keyboard, and I'm going to come up here to this bottom right point, and I'm just going to click and remove that. So now I have an arrow, and all I need to do is rotate 45 degrees. And I'm going to nudge the spacing a little bit. And I kind of want to bring this point up a few pixels, so I'm going to get the direct selection tool, select that top point, and on the keyboard arrow I'm going to press up a few times. So that looks okay. So now I can duplicate and I can rotate. So I'm going to make sure that these are both spaced out equally. So I'm going to establish a little baseline and go 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm going to now select both of these, do a duplicate, Command C, Command F to paste in place, and then a rotate. Boom. And I'm kind of thinking I want this to be the same stroke width as these inner buttons over here. So I'm going to grab the eyedropper tool, that's I on the keyboard, and I'm just going to press, click on this circle shape. So actually that, I don't know if that looks good or not. Yeah, it might be a little too much. So I'm going to undo that and just leave it as is. So now I want to add this circle in the center, so I'm going to get the ellipse tool, and I'm going to enter outline mode again, and I'm going to start my circle at this point, and I'm just going to hold shift and drag down to this point. So now I know it's a perfectly centered circle, and I'm going to scale it down a little bit. Before doing so, I'm going to now get the same stroke width as these buttons, just for some consistency. So I'm going to come up here to Object, Transform, and Scale. So I could probably go 70%. Cool. Alright, it's coming together pretty nicely now. So let's add these middle buttons, and I'm going to do that by drawing a rectangle. I'm going to round the corners. And I'm going to rotate 45 degrees. So now all I need to do is hold Option and drag, and we have two. So I'm gonna need to center these within the shape. So I want to bring a guideline to the middle here, and I'm gonna select both of these buttons. And I guess I'm gonna have to eyeball this, but it shouldn't be too bad. I don't even know if that's centered, but I'll go with that. Yeah, it looks good enough. Alright. So let's see here. I'm going to add these bumpers at the top. So I think a good way to do that would be to duplicate this shape. So I want to come up here to Object, Path, and Offset Path. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a duplicate of the shape I selected, but I now have the option to kind of bring it in or out depending on how big I need it to be. So I think increasing the size by 10 pixels should be enough. And what I'm now going to need to do is I'm going to need to cut this shape and really create those bumpers. So I'm going to make a rectangle. I'm going to make sure that it's centered by drawing a guide. Okay, so now I'm going to draw another guide at both of these edges. So this guide is giving me a good spot where I need to cut this path. So it's going to be the same on both sides. So I'm going to first select this outer shape and double click it to isolate it, and I'm going to get my scissor tool, and I'm just going to click where the intersection is, and I'm going to get rid of this path. So now I just need to find a consistent place to cut over here. So I think what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to draw a square from the center. I'm just going to wing it right now. And that looks like it would be okay. So again, I'm going to draw these guidelines at the edge here. I can now get rid of this shape. Select this outer shape again, and with my scissor tool, click where the intersection is. So now we can get rid of this piece. And we have two identical pieces on both sides of the controller. So I'm going to get rid of these guys since we don't need them anymore. And I'm going to finish this piece by grabbing the pen tool and completing the shape. So I'm just gonna, I think that is fine, and I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. So I'm just using the pen tool and I'm just clicking on the opened part of this and adding another path. So we have bumpers, and I'm going to take the stroke size down to 4, and I might even round the corners just a tiny bit. So with the direct selection tool, I'm going to hold shift and select all of these points and come up here to the corner radius panel and just kind of see what feels good. I think 5 does the trick. Cool. Alright. I kind of like these little lines. They don't really serve a purpose too much, but I'm going to just draw them in for decoration. And I'm just doing this by using the pen tool. I'm going to duplicate and make the stroke edge round. And I kind of want to make this one dashed just to experiment a little bit. Let's give it a little bit bigger gap. I'm just playing around with this right now. I think that might be alright. So I'm going to take the stroke size down a bit here. I want to bring the stroke size up on these buttons to 8. And I think this needs to be nudged a tiny bit. I think that should be it. Alright, coming together pretty good. So now that we have the lines in place, I need to add some color. So I'm going to grab all of these shapes that I can. Okay, I could have just pressed Command A, but I did it the hard way. And I'm going to come over here to my color layer, and I'm going to press Command F to paste everything in place. So now if I change the stroke to be a fill, we have a filled controller. So now is the fun part where I can just start messing around with some of these colors. And I know this controller should be like a off-white, so I kind of have a value in mind. I'm going to bring it up a little bit, go something like that. So I'll come back to this shape. I'm going to also come back to this shape. I really want to color these buttons inside, so I think this one should be red. We'll go blue. Give this one a green, and we'll go yellow. Oh, need to grab that shape from the lines layer. Command C, Command F, and give it a fill of yellow and get rid of that stroke. Cool. So this directional pad, this should be a darker, I think it should be similar to the stroke color, but let's experiment. That might even do the job right there. There we go. I like that. So I'm gonna make the bumpers the same color. So with the eyedrop tool, that's I on the keyboard, I'm gonna go ahead and drop a click on this guy, and I'm gonna do the same on the right edge. And right now, this shape is still open. You see that this path doesn't connect, so that kind of bothers me. I want to make sure that I'm working with completed shapes. So I'm just gonna get the pen tool and complete this real quick. There we go. And I'll do the same thing over here. Pen tool is your friend. Okay, I need to isolate it. I just drew a random path. All right. There we go. Okie dokie. Okay, so now I want to add a nice color to this inner circle. So it might be a little, needs to be a little bit lighter, I feel. Maybe just a smidget lighter. Okay, and then where it's blue here, I'm gonna make this the same color as the controller, this little light grayish yellow. And I'm gonna give that the same color. Oh, forgot about these guys down here. I'm gonna make these buttons the same color as this. And that seems to look all right. Cool. So now we have our lines, we have the colors, and now it's time to add some shading. I want to give these a different color. They weren't really popping that much. All right, cool. Okay, so this is my favorite part, by the way. So I'm gonna add some shading to the bottom portion of this, and I'm gonna do that by copying this main shape right here, and I'm gonna paste it in place on the shading layer. I'll just give it a different color, and I'm gonna copy and paste this once more. Command C, Command F, and nudge it up about 50 pixels or 30. And I'm gonna change the color of this just to get some difference in here. So I want to now select both of them. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit to about 5 pixels. And with both of them selected, I'm going to come over here to the Pathfinder tool and hit divide. And then I need to ungroup these. So let's come up here to Object and Ungroup. And I'm going to get rid of this middle portion. And I'm going to bring this top sliver down a bit. So now we have some nice shading shapes on the top and bottom. And I'm going to change the color of this to this dark purple, and I'm going to bring the transparency down quite a bit, 30%. And I'm going to make this top sliver a lighter color, so I'm going to make it white. I kind of actually like that, how it I'm not even going to mess with the transparency here. Okay, so I want to add some shading to this directional pad. So I'm going to do the same technique over here. I'm going to grab the shape from the color and paste it on the shading layer. And duplicate it, Command C, Command F, and just nudge it down a little bit. So again, with both of them selected, I'm going to come over here to the Pathfinder tool. I'm going to ungroup the shape and get rid of some of these pieces. So now I can nudge these up. And I'm going to make sure that these pieces are in alignment. There we go. So I'm using the direct selection tool and I'm just selecting these outer corners and just dragging. So the lighter shading is going to be on the top. Cool. And the darker shading is going to go on the bottom. And I'm going to make this the same value and see how that looks. Okay, I'm going to go up to 50%. Awesome. And I want to add some shading to the inside of this circle. So how do you think I'm going to do that? You bet it. I'm going to copy and paste. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to nudge. And now Pathfinder. There's probably a better way to do this, but I like doing it this way. It seems to work. If you know an easier way, let me know. Cool. So let's add some shading to these buttons now. Command C, Command F, nudge it down. Okay. Looks like I forgot to get rid of the stroke around one of these guys. Not a big deal. Okay, I'm just kind of guessing right now. That works. So now I want to select all of these. Actually, I'm going to move them a little bit more. There we go. Something like that. Oops. So I'm going to get rid of this middle piece. And I'm going to leave these blue ones to be the dark part of the shade, and these will be the white pieces. Alrighty. So I'm going to do something different for these buttons. I'm going to select these shapes. And I'm going to, instead of giving these a fill, I'm going to give them a stroke. And I'm going to come up here to Object, Path, Offset Path. And I'm going to decrease the size a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so I want to increase the stroke. And I'm going to change the stroke color to white. Okay, so that's a little too big. Alright, now I'm just going to break off some pieces inside of these shapes. So with the scissor tool, C on the keyboard, I'm just going to start clicking around, breaking the shape up a little bit. Let's see how this looks. Not bad. Let's do the same over here. C on the keyboard. All right. Sorry, this is taking me a little bit longer than expected. I think that's a little too much, so I'm going to get rid of a little bit more. Okay. All right. So I'm going to do a little bit more shading inside of these ovals. So I'm going to grab the shape, copy them, paste on top, and F, change the color, duplicate, change that color, and shift it down a little bit. Like this, yeah, will go right there. So now I'm going to select all these shapes and Pathfinder that up. So this one will be same color, dark. I'm going to make this one dark as well. Actually, I think I should need to make this a bit lighter. Oops, there we go. Cool. Okay, so just about there. I'm gonna also get some inner shading to these circles here. So I'm gonna copy those shapes, come over here to the shading layer once more, paste it in place, swap out the colors real quick, and we'll duplicate and shift down. If you guys have any questions about what I'm doing, please ask me. I really hope I'm not confusing anybody. So I'm going to select all these again and Pathfinder it up once more, ungroup. I'm going to get rid of these inner shapes here. I'm going to make sure that this is white and make this dark. Okay, so I think this is looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that everything's aligned and centered. I'm going to add a background color first, actually. So come down here to my background layer and press M on the keyboard. And I'm using a 1080 by 1080 artboard, so I'm going to enter those values here. And I'm going to come up here to the alignment guide and align it to the left and align it to the top. So I'm going to actually make this a green. Cool. And I'm going to draw some guides in the center. because I want this controller to be perfectly centered on the canvas. There we go. So I'm going to select everything now besides the background layer. That's Command A on the keyboard to select everything. And it looks like it's already pretty centered. So I'm just nudging it a little bit to align with this intersection. And it looks like it did pretty good. Okay, so I want to add one more final touch to this, and that's going to be adding a shadow behind it. So to do that, I'm going to lock all my layers. I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to call it Shadow. And I hate the yellow layer colors, so I'm going to change that to whatever, medium blue. And I'm going to select these outer lines from my lines layer and copy that. And I'm just going to paste it in place on my shadow layer. And just so you guys can see everything, I'm going to hide everything else. And what I want to do here is I want to just one solid filled shape of the entire thing. So I'm going to do that by just kind of blowing this up. I'm going to come up here to Object, Expand, and I'm going to make sure both of these are checked and hit OK. And then I'm going to come over here to the Pathfinder tool. I'm going to click this one. I really need to look up the names of what these are called because I feel terrible not knowing that. And I think it's Combine. But that just combined everything. So in outline mode, you'll see these lines are overlapping each other. So that's basically one shape, two shape, three shapes. I want one. So make sure everything's selected and Pathfinder that bad boy. So now we have one shape. So I want everything filled though in the center. So I'm going to make sure that we do that. But now it kind of does something different where we have we have a bunch of shapes now. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and again, like I said, we just want one thing. So I'm going to select this once more and come over to Pathfinder once again and hit this upper right one. I think it's Union. There we go. One shape. So now that we have that, we can kind of move it around and turn the opacity down. So I'm just gonna do something like that and turn the opacity down to about 25. So let's see how that looks. Bring it over just a bit. There we have it. So that should do it. This was a pretty fun one. Please, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Leave a comment in this video or send me a message on Instagram. That's Pasta Nick, and I'd love to help you guys out with this. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.